At the age of 23, our next guest started telling stories. Stories of LGBT youth that were complex and nuanced and unique, and telling them on the radio. The result, outLoud Radio. Welcome its founder, Noah Miller. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine. What makes outLoud Radio unique?
Well, it's the fact that we are telling the stories of real young people, and that the young people are telling them themselves in, as you say, all their complexity, and going on beyond the mainstream representations of gay people, to introduce audiences to the really wide spectrum of identities and experiences that young people are having these days. You know, genderqueer young people, and being LGBTQIA.
QIA, I hear the New York Times is now calling
that's
it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You know, while growing up in a community of color, or being immigrant. So that's what makes us unique, is telling this diversity of stories.
Right. Do you remember the first piece you did now over 8 years ago when you were 23?
Yeah, well, it's probably 9, 10 years ago at this point that we started working with young people and helping them produce their own stories in these short segments. And the first most memorable one for me was a young woman who grew up in a Ukrainian immigrant family here in San Francisco. And she just opens her heart in a very touching and funny way about the process of coming out to her parents, and how she really didn't want to for a long time because she was scared of the conflict. And how she kind of tried to get around it by just letting them figure it out for themselves. She was, you know, like posting rainbow posters in her room and wearing a rainbow bracelet. And then finally, her mom did kind of get the hint and confronted her and said, "Are you a lesbian?" And she had to actually say, "Yes, I think I am." And then she interviews her parents about the whole experience.
So she actually interviews her parents by the coming out experience.
Yeah.
Now, I imagine this was a fairly conservative Christian family.
Yeah, I don't know that the
Ukrainian
religion
Orthodox,
in this particular case had a huge amount to do it, but just the cultural background. They said, well, if we knew anything about sexual orientation, it was that it was, you know, gay people were people that you made fun of, and it was something that was wrong. And what's wonderful about this story and memorable to me is that she talks about her parents going to PFLAG eventually.
Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays.
That's right. And eventually coming around to a much more supportive position, although they still have some issues with it. So it's not sugarcoating the story, but it's showing that this kind of acceptance really can happen.
Now, how old was she at the time of this interview?
She was 16, I believe.
Are you still in touch with her? I mean, now she would be in
absolutely.
her
mid-late
20s.
She's married to the girlfriend that she met in high school, and they're both in medical school, I believe, or are things related to the medical profession on the East Coast. Yeah, I see them occasionally.
You know, sometimes I think the LGBTQIA community is accused of ageism the other way, saying, oh, well, if you're over 40, that, you know, you don't see our faces, you don't see our bodies, you don't see us in advertisements. But sometimes I think the media does it reverse ageism. It's only newsworthy if you're older than 18 or 25 or have a job. I mean, do you find that? I mean, is it difficult telling stories of youth with the added complexity of being a member of the LGBT community?
I think both are absolutely true, and one of the things that we do actually is an intergenerational storytelling project where we bring our teenagers together with LGBT elders from the community. The most recent time we did it, we had folks who were in their 70s, 80s, and one was 91. And for them having that, they feel very much that feeling of invisibility that the elders do. And the youth do too, and that's something that they can, like as you can say, can actually connect over, because that happens on both ends. There's this sweet spot in the middle where you actually exist as an LGBTQ person, and you are kind of part of what people think of as a person. But then you on either end of that age spectrum, the people really struggle with that feeling that they're just not being paid attention to.
Now, you have said that you liked radio from an early age.
Yes.
It was kind of your medium.
Yes.
I mean, were you one of those kids that laid in bed, like I was, who would listen to the CBS Mystery Theater?
You did?
You did too? How did we both come out? You seriously, you've heard of it too?
Yeah, no, I would definitely late at night, I would, under the covers, I'd be listening to my radio, to radio dramas, but even sometimes just nerdier stuff like NPR news reports. When I was an adolescent myself, the war in Bosnia was happening, and I was just fascinated by hearing people's stories from this war zone, and the fact that you could really connect with it. That radio is such an intimate medium. You can really, I think, feel like you understand somebody from hearing their voice. Yeah,
I mean, present company excluded. My favorite medium has always been radio, and I think it is because sometimes a visual can be distracting. And when you're listening to someone tell their story, one, if they're telling it on radio, they're not worried about how they look, they're just talking. So it can be a very intimate experience. You find that too?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think that that's one of the things that makes OutLoud radio important, and this is what the youth tell me too, is that when you are a teenager, you're constantly being judged and feeling self-conscious about how you look, and
which may change in a couple of years.
And if you are exactly, and if you are struggling or questioning your gender presentation and all of this stuff, then that just adds to it. And so to be able to just tell your story and connect to other people without all of that baggage, that visual baggage, makes it powerful.
So what would your coming out story have been like on OutLoud Radio?
Well, I think that
because you're a Bay Area boy. You actually were born and raised in Berkeley.
Yeah, it would have been maybe simpler than some of the stories that I've heard, and it definitely, my coming out story didn't happen until I was 19, which is, younger than some of the folks that I meet in our intergenerational, the elders in that project, but later than a lot of the youth that I work with, because they're coming out when they're 5 or they're in second grade or whatever, and so for me, it's kind of amazing to get to. I still love the stories, and that's what's important about it.
You raise an interesting point that the quote-unquote coming out experience is changing. I have a number of friends who are in their 70s, 80s, and for them coming out was a completely different experience into a different world, legislatively and socially. And the other day I read a story on Facebook about a parent who was convinced he was raising a 7-year-old gay boy because the boy would watch the gay character on Glee, and he was very open about being attracted to cute young boys, and this father was embracing that. And I was thinking, wow, that's very different than when I was young. What's the youngest person you've actually profiled?
Well, when I started OutLoud, before it really officially started, I was working with middle schoolers, and that was really how it got a start. It was that I went back to the middle school that I had attended in Berkeley, and they had a Gay Straight Alliance there, and these were 6th graders doing LGBT rights work, and it just so happened that I had my radio recording equipment and was trying to document them, trying to become a young radio documentarian. And when the equipment got into their hands one time, they did a much better job at what I was trying to do than I was. So yes, we've, you know, I guess that means 11 and 12-year-olds. Now we tend to work with folks who are between the ages of 14 and sometimes their early 20s.
Right. And what are the issues if you're dealing with someone who's younger than 18 and wants to be on your show? Are there still parental consent issues to interview someone younger than 18?
We do have to get consent from parents and guardians.
And have you ever had a problem with someone, a young person who said, I want to be on your show, and a parent who said, I don't think so?
That is, we haven't had to actually face that with the parents, because usually the young people are you know, proactively saying, I can't bring this up to my parents. Oh. And that's really sad when that happens. Of course, there are other ways that they can be involved without putting their voice on the air. So, of course, the young people that do appear in our stories tend to at least have a bit more, you know, parental support than maybe the general population.
Now, the story of the young Ukrainian girl, I'm sure many of your others, have a happy ending. But I'm sure there's been some stories that have just ripped your heart out. Any that come to mind?
Well, the stories that I think really make a huge impact on me in that way, in that negative way, mostly do come from the older generation. And when these older folks talk about about getting beat up outside in the bars or outside of the bars, and having to deal with that kind of discrimination,
institutionalized discrimination,
all the time, it's sometimes just really horrifying. But with the youth that I work with, it's hard to say that any of those stories are a sad story, because they're all in progress, and that's the
beautiful thing about it.
Wonderful thing about getting to do this work is that we get to change the ending of those stories.
In our last few moments, talk to me about where you would like to see outLoud Radio go. I mean, it's a popular show. You can hear it online. It's outLoud.
outloudradio.org.
With the lowercase u, which I think is it, what is the reason for that little bit in your logo, the lowercase o?
Just because, you know, it's about being who we are and not letting anybody else define how we're going to be capitalized. I'd like to see that outLoud gets heard by a lot more people. We're working on doing that. I think that one of the ways that your viewers can help us with that is just by going on Facebook and searching for outLoud Radio and liking us and sharing our stories. We get comments from young people who say that they need something like this in the area that they live, and so that was what we're trying to do, get it farther out.
Great. Well, we hope more people tune in to listen and tune in and get their stories told. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Next up, we speak with Alan Sawyer, director of a new theater piece, Dear Harvey, about the life of the first openly gay elected official in the United States, Harvey Milk. We'll be right back.